Are we reliant on satellites? Absolutely. Are we critically reliant on satellites? Indisputably. Are we doing enough to protect? I don't think we are doing enough. I think one of the problems with space power, if you will, or satellites, is that because we can't see them, out of sight, out of mind. So we see aircraft carriers, or at least one can go to Norfolk, Virginia and see one. We see tanks, we see airplanes, we understand them, they're tangible. Apart from the awesome sights and sounds of a space launch, people don't see satellites unless it's a very clear night. And so it's very hard for them to conceptualize what it is they do for us, or indeed understand what it is they do for us, and then advocate for the proper protection of these systems. So I think the real question is, are we doing enough to protect these systems that we are undeniably critically dependent upon? But that critical dependence isn't necessarily a bad thing when you consider what that critical dependence brings us. It brings us economy of force. Being space dependent is far cheaper than some of the other technological alternatives. It brings, for example, our dependency on space also shapes the force structure we have in the military. Without space, you're probably talking about a much larger military in terms of manpower, in terms of equipment, and so on. That's, of course, going to be a bigger burden to the taxpayer, and all these things. So when you think it through, these critical dependencies aren't necessarily a bad thing. But as I said, the question is, are we doing enough to protect these systems? I think one of the biggest challenges right now for policymakers is it's very easy to talk about space deterrence and such like, but following through on that should something happen. In other words, demonstrating willingness and capacity to act is quite another. And there is reason to doubt actually whether we would do that, should the worst actually happen. I'm not sure many of our adversaries take us that seriously when it comes to space deterrence. It's a great document. I'm not sure, though, that it's a strategy, in the sense that I understand strategy, which is bridging policy objectives with military feasibility. As a vision document, as a roadmap, this is the kind of things we'd like to do, it's fine in and of itself. That said, I do have some issues with the idea that we can deter attacks against space systems, the idea of space deterrence, for example. I think space deterrence is something of a misnomer. There's only deterrence, and space should be part of a wider picture in terms of who are we deterring, why are we deterring them, and what means are available to us to deter them with. Space may be one of those means, but the idea that somehow we would expend scarce political and diplomatic capital on signaling to adversaries that they shouldn't take pot shots at our satellites strikes me as a bit silly and misses the whole point of deterrence, which is, of course, to deter war. If one has resilience, that will contribute to your deterrence posture. It's not a guarantee of deterrence, but with resilience, one sees that attacking our space systems becomes a more meaningless task, because with resilience, you're still going to have mission assurance. So what's the point of attacking your space systems? That in itself is deterring an adversary from taking actions that we don't want them to take, and that's a good thing. If they don't see the benefit of doing it because we're resilient, great. Now, just because we're resilient, though, doesn't mean we're going to deter. Some countries may find that they're in such a situation that their interests demand that they do something like attacking our space systems. And again, resilience is part of a wider array of defensive measures that we can take to make sure that even when that worst case scenario occurs, we will actually at least prevail.